They tell you death is the worst thing that can happen to a person. They're wrong. I know because I was sacrificed to Molag Bal on the 17th of Sun's dusk, 4E 186. Death would have been mercy. My name is Tertius Valano. 3 years ago, I was a priest of RK serving the chapel in Skingrad. I performed funeral rites for 27 years. I blessed the dead and guided souls to their rest. I thought I understood the boundary between life and death. Thought I knew what lay beyond. I thought RK's protection was absolute, that the god of the cycle could shield his faithful from any darkness. I was wrong about all of it. I'm telling you this now because I have a window. Brief moments of clarity where his hold loosens just enough for me to think my own thoughts, to speak my own words. These moments are rare and growing rarer. Soon there will be nothing left of Tertius Valano but the shape of a man, a hollow thing filled with Molag Bal's will, a tool for domination, for corruption, for the claiming of souls. But right now, in this moment, I am still enough of myself to remember, to warn you, to tell you what really happens when you are sacrificed to the Daedric Prince of Domination. It starts long before the ritual. That's the first thing you need to understand. The sacrifice doesn't begin when they tie you to the altar. It begins the moment Molag Bal's attention turns toward you. And for those of us who served the divines, for those who thought ourselves protected by faith and righteousness, we were the most valuable targets of all. The irony isn't lost on me. My entire life was dedicated to protecting the sanctity of death, to ensuring souls passed peacefully from this world to the next. I thought that made me safe. I thought my service to RK had built a wall around my soul that no Daedric prince could breach. Molag Bal doesn't break walls. He makes you open the door yourself. He makes you invite him in. And by the time you understand what's happening, it's far too late to refuse. Life in Skingrad was quiet in those days. The chapel of RK stood on the western edge of the city, a modest building of white stone that caught the evening sun and glowed like a candle in the dusk. I'd served there since I was 17, took my vows at 20, and spent the next 27 years tending to the dead and comforting the living. The work was steady. Skingrad had its share of deaths like any city. Elderly merchants passing in their sleep, young soldiers killed by bandits on the Gold Road, the occasional murder that required both investigation and blessing. I performed the rites, spoke the words of passage, and ensured that RK's protection followed each soul into whatever came next. I was good at my work, better than good. I had a reputation throughout the county as someone who could handle even the most difficult cases. Bodies recovered weeks after death, their souls lingering in confusion. Victims of foul magic who needed extensive purification before burial. I'd even performed rites for a vampire once, a wretched creature who'd sought redemption in her final moments. That last one probably caught their attention. The cult operating in Skingrad was small, careful, professional. I didn't know they existed until the night they came for me. None of us did. They wore the faces of respectable citizens during the day. A wine merchant, a city guard, the wife of a minor noble. At night, they gathered in places the light didn't reach and offered prayers to the Prince of Domination. Looking back, I can see the signs I missed. A stranger attending evening services 3 weeks before it happened. A man in expensive clothes who asked detailed questions about soul protection, about the boundaries of Arkay's domain, about what could and couldn't be undone. I answered his questions with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades studying these matters. I explained the sanctity of the soul, the permanence of Arkay's blessing, the absolute nature of divine protection. He listened carefully, took notes, thanked me for my time. I never saw his face clearly. He always stood where the shadows fell thickest in the chapel. But I remember his voice. Cultured, educated, the accent of someone from the imperial city. He called me Brother Tertius, said my reputation for incorruptibility was well deserved. I took it as a compliment. The funeral that sealed my fate happened on the 12th of sun's dusk. A young woman named Livia Marcellos, daughter of one of Skingrad's prominent families. She died suddenly, unexpectedly. Some said it was a weak heart, others whispered about poison. The family wanted the most thorough blessing possible, the kind that would ensure safe passage regardless of the circumstances of death. I spent 6 hours performing the rites, cleansing the body, blessing every part of her from crown to soul, invoking Arkay's protection with every prayer I knew. When I finished, I knew with absolute certainty that Livia Marcellas would find peace in whatever lay beyond. The stranger was there, standing in the back of the chapel during the ceremony. I saw him through the candlelight, his face still hidden in shadow. He watched the entire ritual with focused attention, like he was memorizing every word, every gesture. He was measuring me, seeing how strong my faith was, how thoroughly I could invoke divine protection, how incorruptible I truly was. Because for Molag Bal, purity isn't a shield, it's a target. The more righteous you are, the more devoted to the divines, the more valuable you become when broken. A corrupted priest of Arkay is worth 1,000 ordinary souls. The domination of someone truly faithful, someone who believes absolutely in divine protection, that's a prize worth considerable effort. I walked home that night feeling satisfied with my work. The sunset was beautiful over the vineyards. The air smelled of late autumn grapes and wood smoke. I had a small dinner waiting in my quarters at the chapel. A quiet evening of prayer and study ahead of me. I never made it inside. They took me between the chapel door and the threshold, 6 of them, moving with coordinated precision. No shouting, no drawn weapons. Just sudden overwhelming force that drove me to the ground before I could cry out. The wine merchant I'd bought from for years pressed a cloth over my mouth and nose. Sweet smell. Chemical. The world blurred at the edges. I tried to invoke Arkay's name to call for protection, but my tongue wouldn't form the words. The chemical was already working, pulling me down into darkness that had nothing to do with sleep. My last clear thought before unconsciousness was confusion. This couldn't be happening, not to me, not to a priest of Arkay. We were protected, we were safe. That was the first lie my faith had told me. I woke in absolute darkness, cold stone beneath me, the smell of earth and old blood and something else. Something that made my nose burn and my eyes water even closed. My hands were bound behind my back with rough rope that bit into my wrists. My feet were tied at the ankles. When I tried to move, pain shot through my shoulders. Voices echoed somewhere nearby. Low conversation I couldn't quite make out. Footsteps on stone, the sound of metal scraping against a rock. I opened my eyes. The darkness was nearly complete, broken only by faint light leaking from somewhere beyond my field of vision. As my sight adjusted, I could make out rough stone walls, support beams of old timber. This was a mine, abandoned, judging by the smell and the silence. Somewhere outside Skingrad, far enough that no one would hear screaming. That thought sent the first real spike of fear through my chest. I tried again to speak Arkay's name, to invoke his protection. The words came this time, but they felt hollow, empty, like shouting into a void that swallowed sound. "He can't hear you down here." The voice came from the darkness to my left. Familiar. The stranger from the chapel. We're standing in a place consecrated to a different power now. Your god's attention doesn't reach this deep. Light flared. A torch, lit by hands I couldn't see. It illuminated a space much larger than I'd thought. A natural cavern that had been expanded by mining operations, then abandoned when the silver veins ran dry, or when something else was found in the depths. The stranger stepped into the light. I saw his face clearly for the first time. Young, perhaps 30. Handsome in the way imperial city nobles often are, with refined features and expensive grooming. He wore dark robes now instead of the fine clothes from the chapel, embroidered with symbols I recognized from my studies. Daedric script, Molag Bal's marks. "Brother Tertius." He smiled, not cruelly, almost warmly, like we were old friends meeting for wine. "I apologize for the rough treatment. It was necessary, you understand." I didn't understand anything. My mind was still catching up, still trying to process that I'd been abducted by a Daedric cult, that I was lying bound in a mine somewhere beyond the reach of help. Why? The word came out as a croak. My throat was dry, my tongue thick from whatever they used to drug me. "Because you're perfect." He crouched down next to me, his expression earnest. 27 years of faithful service, incorruptible reputation, strong connection to the divine. Every prayer you've spoken, every soul you've blessed, every moment of genuine faith, it's all made you incredibly valuable. Do you know what happens when someone like you is offered to the king of rape? When absolute righteousness is broken and remade into servitude? His hand touched my face. I tried to pull away, but couldn't move. You become a tool of exquisite purpose. A priest of Arkay transformed into an instrument of domination. The very thing you've spent your life protecting, the sanctity of the soul, you'll be used to violate it. That's the beauty of it, Brother Tertius. That's why he wants you specifically. I spat at him, or tried to. My mouth was too dry. He stood wiping his hand on his robe. "We have a few hours before midnight. I suggest you spend them in prayer. Ask your God for protection. Call on him as loudly as you can. It won't help, but it will make the moment of understanding that much more profound when you realize how thoroughly you've been abandoned." They dragged me deeper into the mine, through passages that descended at steep angles, past chambers filled with broken equipment and the debris of old excavations. The air grew colder with each level we descended. My breath fogged in the torchlight. We emerged into a chamber that took my breath away. It was vast, easily 100 feet across. The ceiling disappeared into darkness overhead. The walls were smooth stone that showed no tool marks, as if the space had been carved by something other than mortal hands. And at the center, dominating everything, was the altar. Black stone, seamless, carved with channels and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The marks seemed to move in my peripheral vision, twisting into shapes that suggested things I couldn't quite comprehend. The stone radiated cold, Not natural cold, but the absolute absence of warmth. The kind of cold that comes from places where life has no meaning. They laid me on it. The stone's chill bit through my robes immediately, leaching the heat from my body. They repositioned my bonds, stretching my arms above my head and securing them to iron rings set into the altar's surface. My legs were spread and bound the same way. I was completely immobile, exposed, helpless. Around the chamber's perimeter, I could see other things in the flickering torchlight. Chains bolted to the walls, scratches in the stone that might have been from fingernails. Dark stains that could only be old blood. And in the corners, hunched shapes that I first took for piles of rags, but then recognized as people, or what had once been people, soul-shriven. I knew them from descriptions in texts. Souls claimed by Daedric princes, their bodies twisted into mockeries of mortal form. They moved with jerky, uncoordinated motions. When the light touched them, they cringed away, making sounds like animals in pain. Previous offerings, the cult leader said, following my gaze. Not all survive the process intact. Most actually don't. Their souls were claimed, but their bodies remained, trapped between realms. They exist here now, in this space between Mandus and Cold Harbor, aware but unable to die, unable to do anything but witness what happens to others. One of them looked at me. The face was wrong, features melted and reformed into something that only suggested humanity. But the eyes were human, aware, pleading. "Help me," those eyes said. "Please, end this." I couldn't look away, couldn't stop staring into those desperate, damned eyes until someone moved between us, blocking my view. The cult members, 7 of them now, began arranging themselves around the altar. Each took a position at a specific point, forming a pattern I recognized from my studies. A septagram. 7 points for 7 aspects of domination. Each cultist carried a blade, ceremonial, ornate but sharp. I could see the edges gleaming in the torchlight. You're probably wondering if you can still be saved. The leader stood at my head, looking down at me. If someone might find you in time, if your god might intervene at the last moment. He leaned closer. I could smell wine on his breath. No one is coming, Brother Tertius. We've been planning this for months. Your absence won't be noted until morning services. By then you'll be gone in every way that matters. And Arkay? He smiled. He's never stopped a sacrifice to Molag Bal, not once in all of history. Do you know why? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the moment someone is chosen, truly chosen by the King of Rape, they're already his. The claim is made before the ritual ever begins. Your soul has been marked since you answered my questions about divine protection. Since you demonstrated your absolute faith. That faith is what he'll use to break you. Your certainty in Arkay's power will be the hammer that shatters your will. He moved to his position at the foot of the altar. The 7 cultists raised their blades. It's midnight, he said. Time to begin. I tried to pray. Opened my mouth and called to Arkay with every shred of faith I'd accumulated in 44 years of life. Begged for protection, for intervention, for the blessing that had always been there when I needed it. Nothing answered. The emptiness where Arkay's presence should have been was more terrifying than anything else happening. For the first time in my life, I reached for the divine and found only silence. The cultists began to chant, words in a language I didn't recognize, but that my soul understood. They weren't speaking to Molag Bal. They were speaking for him, giving voice to his will, to his hunger, to his absolute authority over those he claimed. The air in the chamber changed, grew heavier, thicker, like trying to breathe underwater. The temperature dropped further. My breath came in short gasps that formed elaborate clouds of frost. And then I felt it. The first touch of his attention. I can't properly describe what it feels like to be noticed by a Daedric prince. Human language doesn't have words for that sensation. Imagine being seen by something infinite, something that exists beyond the limitations of time and space, something that knows every thought you've ever had and every choice you'll ever make. Now imagine that thing wants to own you. The attention pressed down on me like physical weight. I felt it on my skin, in my lungs, behind my eyes. Molag Bal's awareness flowed into the chamber like water filling a vessel, and I was drowning in it. The cultists' chanting grew louder, more urgent. Their blades moved in synchronized patterns, cutting lines in the air that glowed with sickly blue light. The light traced symbols above the altar, binding marks, claiming marks, sigils of domination older than human civilization. One of them stepped forward, the wine merchant who'd helped abduct me. His blade descended toward my left arm. I tried to flinch away, but the bonds held me perfectly still. The blade bit into my forearm. Pain flared, sharp and immediate. Blood welled from the cut and began flowing down my arm toward channels carved in the altar's surface. The blood hit the stone and moved against gravity, drawn into the patterns by something other than natural law. The blade moved again, my right arm, my left thigh, my right, my chest. 7 cuts, 7 points of pain, 7 flows of blood drawn into the altar's hungry channels. Each cut was precise, calculated to bleed freely without causing fatal damage. This wasn't meant to kill me. Death would have been escape. My blood filled the channels completely, creating a perfect pattern of crimson against black stone. And where the blood completed the circuit, where the final symbol was formed, the altar began to respond. Heat. Incredible, searing heat rising from stone that had been deathly cold moments before. The blood in the channels began to boil. Steam rose, carrying the scent of burning copper and something else. Something wrong. The smell of oblivion touching Mundus, of barriers being violated. Above the altar, reality began to tear. It started as a shimmer, like heat haze on summer stone. But the distortion grew, spreading, deepening, until I was looking through a hole in the world. Through it, I could see another place. A sky of red and black. Architecture that defied geometry. Buildings that couldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Rivers flowing upward. Lights that cast darkness instead of illumination. Cold Harbor. The realm of Molag Bal, where he ruled as absolute monarch over a kingdom of suffering. Where souls writhed in eternal torment, where the very concept of freedom had been excised from reality. A place of perfect, infinite domination, and it was looking back at me. The cultists' chanting reached a crescendo. Their voices merged into a single sound that wasn't quite language, wasn't quite music. It was the audible equivalent of the rift above me. Wrong. Impossible. A noise that shouldn't exist in the mortal world. Through that sound came something else. A presence that made his earlier attention feel like a gentle breeze before a hurricane. Molag Bal himself, reaching through the barrier between his realm and mine, extending his will into the chamber with the focused intent of a predator claiming prey. I felt his mind touch mine. Everything I was, everything I'd ever been, every memory and thought and secret conviction laid bare in an instant. Molag Bal rifled through my consciousness like someone sorting through papers, examining each piece, cataloguing, judging, claiming. He saw my childhood in Kavach, my decision to serve Arkay, my first funeral rite, every soul I'd blessed in 27 years, every prayer I'd spoken, every moment of genuine faith. And he laughed, not with sound. The laughter existed directly in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. It was the laughter of something that found my faith deeply, genuinely amusing. All those years of devotion, all that certainty in divine protection, and here I was, bound to his altar, bleeding into his symbols, already claimed despite every prayer I'd ever spoken. The rift widened. Tendrils of darkness reached through, manifesting in the chamber as shadows that moved independently of any light source. They touched my skin and I screamed, cold, burning. Violation on a level I hadn't imagined possible. The shadows weren't just touching my body, they were reaching into it, into my soul, finding the core of who I was and beginning the process of remaking it. My will, that essential sense of self that makes choices and determines their action, began to compress under impossible pressure. I felt it being shaped, molded, transformed from something autonomous into something that existed only to serve. The cultists stepped back from the altar. Their work was done. The ritual had reached its critical phase, where mortal intervention was no longer necessary. What happened next was between me and the Prince of Domination. I tried to resist, tried to assert my identity, my autonomy, my right to my own soul. The resistance was crushed immediately, effortlessly, the way you might swat an insect. Molag Bal's will was absolute. Fighting it wasn't futile, it was incomprehensible. You might as well try to fight gravity or argue with the progression of time. The shadows deepened, spread, covered me completely until I existed in absolute darkness. And in that darkness, I felt my soul beginning to separate from my body. The process wasn't clean or quick. It felt like being flayed from the inside out. Every connection between spirit and flesh was severed, individually, slowly, with deliberate care to maximize the sensation. I was being taken apart piece by piece so I could be reassembled according to a different design. My consciousness followed my soul, up from the altar, through the rift, into Cold Harbor itself. The first thing I understood about Cold Harbor was that it hated me. Not in any personal sense. The realm itself, the very substance of it, was antithetical to mortal existence. Reality there functioned according to different laws, shaped by Molag Bal's will into a perfect expression of his nature. Domination made manifest in geography and architecture, and the very air itself. I stood on ground that felt solid but looked translucent. Beneath my feet, I could see other layers, other surfaces, infinite depth that suggested the realm existed in more dimensions than mortal minds could process. The sky overhead was wrong. Red light from no visible source. Clouds that moved in geometric patterns. Stars that were too close and too sharp, like they might fall and impale unwary observers. Around me rose the structures Cold Harbor was famous for. Buildings that made my eyes hurt, their architecture violating every principle of construction. Towers that bent at impossible angles. Bridges spanning gulfs I couldn't see the bottom of. Fortresses that seemed to exist simultaneously at multiple distances, near and far at the same time. And chains. Everywhere, chains. They stretched from building to building, hung from the sky, lay coiled on the ground. Some were physical iron, others seemed to be made of light or shadow or raw concept given temporary form. They were empty now, but I could feel their purpose. Binding, controlling, ensuring that nothing in Cold Harbor moved without Molag Bal's permission. I wasn't alone. Figures moved through the bizarre landscape, soul-shriven like the ones I'd seen in the chamber, but far more of them. Hundreds, thousands perhaps, scattered across a realm that might be infinite. They shambled through their torment with the mechanical motions of those who'd long since given up hope of escape. Some were humanoid enough to recognize. Others had been transformed into shapes that barely suggested their mortal origins. I saw a thing with too many arms pulling itself along the ground, a creature whose face had split down the middle and reformed sideways. A mass of eyes and mouths that might once have been several people, now fused into a single screaming amalgamation. This was my future. This was what happened to those sacrificed to Molag Bal. One of the soul-shriven approached me. It moved with more purpose than the others, more awareness in its movements. When it got close enough, I could see it had once been a woman. Altmer, judging by the bone structure still visible beneath the corruption. Her skin was grey and cracked, her eyes sunken but still conscious. Nu. Her voice was like gravel scraping stone. You're Nu. Can still remember being whole. Treasure that. Won't last. I tried to speak but found I had no voice here, or no throat. I wasn't certain I even had a body in the conventional sense. I was consciousness given form by expectation, shaped by my memory of what I should look like. She seemed to understand without words. How long? She asked. How long since you were sacrificed? I held up fingers, tried to indicate minutes, hours at most. Lucky. She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Still fresh, still fighting. That's when it hurts worst. When you still remember being free. She pointed towards the horizon, toward a structure that dominated the landscape like a mountain of malice. A palace of black stone and twisted metal, its spires reaching up to impale the red sky. Molag Bal's seat of power, the heart of Cold Harbor. He'll call you there. Eventually. They all get called, some quickly, some after centuries, no pattern to it. But you're a priest, aren't you? Or were. I can see it in you somehow. The shape of what you were. I managed to nod. Then you'll be called soon. He enjoys corrupting the faithful personally. Makes it mean more when he breaks you. When he makes you thank him for it. Something in the way she said that last part made me look at her more closely. Recognition in her eyes. Experience. How long? I tried to ask. How long have you been here? 317 years, she said. I was a battle mage in the Alessian Empire. Powerful. Proud. Thought my magic could protect me from anything. Molag Bal showed me how small my power was. How easily everything I was could be taken and remade. She looked toward the palace. I've been summoned 47 times. Each time he finds new ways to break what little remains. Each time I think there's nothing left to take. Each time I'm wrong. Other soul-shriven had begun to notice me. More were shambling in my direction, drawn by the novelty of someone new. Their faces, where they still had faces, showed a hunger that had nothing to do with physical need. They wanted my fear, my fresh terror, my still intact sense of self. They wanted to feed on my suffering because it was the only thing in Cold Harbor that had any flavor. Run. The Altmer woman grabbed my arm. Her grip was strong despite her withered appearance. They won't hurt you. They can't, but they'll overwhelm you, touch you, make you feel what they've become. Run until he calls you. At least that way you choose that direction for a little while longer. I ran through streets that curved in directions that shouldn't exist, past buildings whose interiors were visible through walls, showing rooms full of torture devices and altars and things I couldn't identify, through plazas where soul-shriven gathered in masses, their torment somehow communal. Behind me I could hear them following, moaning, crying, calling out in languages dead for millennia, the sound of absolute despair given voice. I ran until the landscape changed, until I stood before a chasm so vast I couldn't see the far side. A river flowed through it, but the liquid wasn't water. It moved too slowly, too thickly, and it glowed with the same sickly light that had filled the rift above the altar. Liquid suffering, the distilled essence of every torment inflicted in Cold Harbor, flowing endlessly towards some destination I couldn't see. I stopped at the edge, unable to go further. The soul-shriven caught up, surrounding me. Their hands reached out, touching my arms, my face, my chest. Everywhere they touched, I felt their suffering transfer, the memory of their domination flowing into me like poison. This was what awaited. This was forever. And then I felt it. The call. Not words or sound, a compulsion that existed below conscious thought. A command that bypassed choice entirely. My legs moved without my willing them to. My body turned toward the distant palace. And I began walking, the soul shriven, parting before me, their hands falling away as something far more powerful claimed my attention. Molag Bal had summoned me. The journey to the palace took hours or seconds. Time functioned strangely in Cold Harbor, not flowing in a line, but pooling and eddying like water. I was walking, and then I was standing at the base of the palace. I was at the base, and then I was climbing stairs carved from what looked like frozen screams. I was climbing, and then I was inside. The throne room was exactly what I should have expected, and nothing I could have imagined. Vast beyond measurement, filled with the implements of domination. Chains hanging from the ceiling, their links made from souls fused together. Altars positioned at geometric intervals, each one stained with the evidence of countless violations. Cages suspended in midair, some empty, others containing things I didn't want to look at too closely. And at the center, the throne itself. It wasn't ornate or jeweled like mortal seats of power. It was simple, black stone. But the throne radiated authority the way suns radiate light. Sitting in it was the king of rape. Molag Bal's form shifted between shapes. Sometimes he appeared vaguely humanoid, towering and heavily muscled. Sometimes he was something else entirely, a mass of geometry and shadow that my mind refused to process. His face, when he had one, was handsome and terrible at once. Perfect features that promised pleasure and delivered only domination. Tertius Valano. His voice filled the throne room, filled my head, filled the entire realm. Priest of Arche, 27 years of faithful service, incorruptible, righteous. Mine. I stood before him without choosing to stand. My body positioned itself according to his will. Do you understand yet? He leaned forward, his attention focusing on me with intensity that made my earlier experience of being noticed feel like a gentle caress. Do you comprehend what happened the moment you answered that cultist's questions? I couldn't speak, but he read the answer in my thoughts. No. You still believe this is about the ritual? About the cult, about being tied to an altar. He stood. The motion should have been simple, but it rewrote reality. The throne room rearranged itself around him, the walls and ceiling and floor adjusting to maintain their proper distance from his presence. He walked toward me. Each step was thunder, earthquake, the collapse of empires. You were mine the moment you proved your faith was absolute, the moment you demonstrated that you believed completely in Arce's protection. That certainty, that unshakable conviction, that's what I needed. Because breaking certain faith is so much sweeter than breaking doubt. He stood directly before me now, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his form, close enough to see my reflection in his eyes, small and terrified, and already changing. Watch. He placed his hand on my head, and I saw 27 years of memories revised, every funeral rite I'd performed, shown from a different perspective. I'd thought I was protecting souls, guiding them to peaceful rest. Now I saw what really happened. The souls I'd blessed were claimed anyway, their passage through Aetherius corrupted by the fact that I, their guide, now belonged to Molag Bal. Every prayer I'd spoken in his service would retroactively taint what I'd done before. My entire life's work was ruined. All those people I'd tried to help, I'd actually marked for eventual claiming. No. I finally found my voice. No, that's not. You can't change the past. That's not... I'm a Daedric prince. His voice was almost gentle, almost kind. I exist outside time. For me, past and future are just different directions to walk. Everything you did as Arce's priest, you did as my agent. You just didn't know it yet. The hand on my head began to change me. I felt my faith in Arce being rewritten. The certainty I'd felt for decades, twisted into certainty of a different kind. The devotion I developed through years of service was maintained but redirected. All that capacity for worship, for dedication, for absolute conviction, it remained intact. It simply served a different master now. This was the domination Molag Bal was famous for. He didn't destroy the will. That would be wasteful. He captured it, reshaped it, made it serve his purposes while maintaining its strength. A broken tool was useless. A dominated tool was a thing of beauty. You will return to Mundus, he said. You will appear to have escaped. The cult will be conveniently discovered by authorities. You will be rescued, healed, returned to your life. And you will serve me better than any willing cultist ever could. I wanted to refuse, wanted to resist, but the choice wasn't mine anymore. My will was his will, my purpose was his purpose. I would serve because that's what I was now. An instrument of domination shaped like a priest. The best part, he continued, releasing my head and stepping back, is that you'll still remember being Tertius Vallano. You'll retain your identity, your memories, your personality, but they'll exist in service to me. You'll preach Arce's blessings while marking souls for my eventual claiming. You'll comfort the dying while ensuring they're vulnerable to corruption. You'll be everything you were, twisted into everything you feared. He returned to his throne. The audience was ending. Go now. Return to your body. Live your life. And know that every moment of freedom you seem to have is an illusion. You're mine, Tertius. You were always mine. I just had to make you understand that. The throne room collapsed. Cold Harbor fell away. I was pulled backward through the rift, through layers of reality, back toward the mortal world where my body still lay bleeding on an altar in an abandoned mine. I woke screaming. My body was on the altar, but the cultists were gone. The chamber was different than I remembered. Damaged, scorch marks on the walls, bodies scattered on the floor, the smell of recent combat. Someone was leaning over me, a woman in armor I recognized, vigilant of Stendar. Her face was grim but relieved. Easy, you're safe now. We found you in time. Safe. The word was meaningless, obscene. She cut my bonds, helped me sit up. My arms and legs were covered in cuts, but they'd already started healing, faster than they should have. The transformation had begun. The cultists? My voice was rough. Dead or fled. We've been tracking this group for months. Got a tip about activity in this mine tonight. Looks like we interrupted some kind of ritual. She had no idea. None of them did. The ritual was already complete. The sacrifice had been made. I was already lost. They took me to healers in Skingrad, examined the cuts, declared them superficial, asked questions about what had happened. I gave them enough truth to be believable. Abduction, cult, interrupted ritual. I didn't mention Cold Harbor, didn't describe the true nature of what had been done to me. They wouldn't have understood. Or they would have killed me, which might have been kinder. Except I couldn't die. I'd tried, alone in my room at the chapel after being returned there. Put a knife to my throat and pressed. The blade wouldn't penetrate, not because of physical resistance. My body simply wouldn't obey the command to end itself. Molag Bal wouldn't permit his tools to break themselves. I tried to enter the chapel's main sanctuary, the room where Arkay's presence was strongest. Made it 3 steps inside before the pain started. Like being burned and frozen simultaneously, like having my skin peeled off by invisible hands. Arkay's blessing. The same blessing I'd called upon for 27 years, now rejected me as the corrupted thing I was. The priest who'd taken over my duties found me collapsed in the doorway. Tried to help. His hand touched my arm, and he recoiled like he'd been shocked. Tertius, what? He stared at me with growing horror. What happened to you? I couldn't answer. Couldn't explain that I was an abomination now. That everything I'd been was turned inside out. That I still looked like a priest of Arkay, but served his antithesis. I left Skingrad that night. Couldn't stay. Couldn't continue the pretense of being who I was before. For 3 years I've wandered. Cyrodiil, Skyrim, Hammerfell, High Rock. Anywhere but one place for long, and everywhere I go I feel them. The righteous, the faithful, the incorruptible. They call to me like beacons, not through any sense I possessed before, through the connection Molag Bal forged when he claimed me. I can feel their certainty, their absolute faith, their unshakable conviction that the divines will protect them. And I'm compelled to approach them, to engage in conversation, to ask questions that seem innocent but are actually assessments, measurements, determining who among the faithful would be most valuable when broken. I fight this compulsion. Every time I feel it rising, I try to resist. Sometimes I succeed for hours, days, once, but eventually it overwhelms my will, and I find myself walking toward my target, my mouth forming words I don't choose, my mind cataloging information I don't want. I'm a scout, a talent finder. I identify the most righteous souls and mark them for eventual claiming. And every person I mark, every faithful servant of the divines I evaluate. It strengthens the chains binding me to Molag Bal. 3 months ago, I found a priest of Mara in solitude. Young woman, devoted. Spent her days comforting widows and orphans. Genuine compassion in everything she did. The kind of person who made the world slightly better just by existing in it. I spent a week in conversation with her, asked about her faith, listened to her describe Mara's love, felt her absolute certainty that divine compassion would shield her from any darkness. When I left Solitude, I could feel the mark on her soul, invisible to everyone else, clear as daylight to me and to Molag Bal. 6 weeks later, I heard she'd been abducted, found in a mine outside the city, dead, officially. But I knew better. I could still feel her, distant and fading in Cold Harbor. Another soul shriven, another tool, another victim of my service to the King of Rape. The compulsions are getting stronger. The windows of clarity, moments like this when I'm still mostly Tertius Vallano, are growing rare. Sometimes days pass where I'm just an extension of Molag Bal's will, identifying targets and evaluating their potential with cold efficiency. I'm forgetting what it felt like to be free. Forgetting the certainty I once had that divine protection was real and absolute. Those memories are being overwritten by different knowledge. The understanding that all faith does is make you a better prize when claimed. That devotion to the divines just paints a target on your soul. That's what happens when you're sacrificed to Molag Bal. You don't die. You don't even change, not in ways visible to others. You remain yourself, retain your identity, keep your memories and personality intact. But all of it serves him now. Your intelligence becomes his tool for identifying valuable souls. Your social skills become his method of approach. Your knowledge of faith becomes his weapon for corrupting it. You become a perfect predator, hunting the righteous while wearing the face of someone they trust. The woman in Solitude trusted me, saw a fellow servant of the divines who'd suffered trauma, wanted to help me find my way back to faith. Every kindness she showed me just gave me more information to pass along to the cult that eventually took her. I remember her face when they found her. The confusion, the betrayal, the realization that the kind priest she tried to help had actually been marking her for sacrifice. I felt nothing. The part of me that would have felt guilt or horror was dominated completely in that moment. I was pure function, pure service to my master. Later, in a brief window of clarity, I wept for her. Tried to pray to RK for her soul. The prayer went nowhere. RK doesn't hear me anymore. I'm not his priest now. I'm Molag Bal's. This is what they should tell people about Daedric worship. About what really happens when you're claimed by a Prince of Oblivion. It's not dramatic. Not a sudden transformation into a monster. It's the slow erosion of everything you are, one choice at a time, until you wake up one day and realize you've become the very thing you spent your life opposing. The soul Hariven in Cold Harbor, the ones shambling through eternal torment, they have it easier than me. Their suffering is external, visible, comprehensible. Mine is internal. I am free to walk the world, appear normal, interact with others, and every interaction is poisoned by the fact that I'm evaluating them, measuring their faith, determining if they're valuable enough to mark. I can feel one now. Here in this tavern where I'm writing this testimony, a Nord warrior at the bar, devoted to Talos, unshakable faith in the divinity of the ninth divine. That certainty radiates from him like heat. I'm going to approach him soon, can feel the compulsion building. In a few minutes I'll close this journal, walk over, strike up a conversation, ask innocent questions that aren't innocent at all. By tomorrow, I'll know everything Molag Bal needs to know to claim him, and I can't stop it. That's the real horror of being sacrificed to the king of rape. The sacrifice never ends. Every day you wake up and sacrifice a little more of yourself. Every person you mark is another piece of who you were being fed to the prince of domination. Eventually, there won't be anything left of Tertius Villano. Just the shape of a man walking through the world, marking souls for corruption. A tool that remembers being human, but can't access that humanity when it matters. I'm writing this in the hope that someone finds it. That someone understands what really happens. Death would have been mercy. Eternal torture in Cold Harbor would have been preferable. This is worse. Being free but enslaved, aware but controlled, yourself but not. If you're reading this, if you found this journal, know that I'm probably already being compelled to find you. The righteous call to me, the faithful are beacons I cannot ignore. And if we've spoken, if I've asked you questions about your faith or your devotion or your certainty in divine protection, I'm sorry. I've marked you. It's what I do now. What he made me. This is what happens when you're sacrificed to Molag Bal. You become the sacrifice that never ends. You become the tool used to create more sacrifices. You become the thing you feared most while retaining just enough awareness to understand what you've become. The Nord is looking at me. Our eyes met. He smiled, friendly. I can feel the compulsion rising. Time to close this journal. Time to serve my master. Time to mark another soul for domination. May the divines have mercy on you. I won't. I can't. I'm his.